I never imagined I'd be the one to discover my best friend's darkest secret, a secret that could destroy not just his life, but mine too. I always thought I knew everything about Aaron. We'd been best friends since middle school, practically brothers in every sense but blood. We grew up together, navigated the awkwardness of teenage years, survived high school drama, and then partied through college as inseparable as ever. When Aaron got married to Emily 5 years ago, I was his best man, standing by his side as he promised her a lifetime of love and commitment. I had always believed he meant those vows. Turns out, promises are easier made than kept. It all began about 6 months ago, though looking back, the signs were probably there before that. Aaron started acting differently. Nothing obvious at first, just little things. He'd cancel plans at the last minute or show up late to our regular hangouts. And when he did show up, he'd seem distracted, constantly checking his phone, but giving no real explanation. When I asked him what was going on, he would laugh it off and say work was getting to him. Aaron worked in finance, and his hours were demanding, so I didn't push too hard. I figured the stress was making him distant. But soon, it wasn't just the excuses or the missed meetups. Aaron started lying, or at least that's what it felt like. He'd tell Emily he was working late, but then he'd swing by my place to grab a beer, claiming he just needed to get away from everything for a while. At first, I didn't think much of it. Married life was probably wearing on him. People need breaks from time to time, right? Then there was that name, Leah. The first time I saw it, we were out at a bar, just like we had done countless times over the years. Aaron was being his usual self, cracking jokes and sipping his beer, but when his phone buzzed, he grabbed it so fast, I barely had time to register the name. Leah. He looked at the screen for a moment, then flipped the phone over and slid it into his pocket, his face blank, as if nothing had happened. "Who's Leah?" I asked, keeping my tone light, even though something about it made my stomach turn. Aaron paused just a beat too long before he laughed. "Someone from work. Nothing major." I nodded, but something about the way he brushed it off felt wrong. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that settled in my chest. But what was I supposed to do? It wasn't my place to pry into his personal life. Aaron was an adult. He could have female colleagues, right? But the way he reacted, the way he seemed to panic when that name flashed on his phone, made me suspicious. I pushed the thought aside for the next few weeks, but it kept creeping back in. Every time we met up, I'd catch him checking his phone more frequently. He seemed distracted, distant, even when we were sitting right next to each other. And every time I saw him with Emily, that knot of suspicion in my gut tightened. Emily didn't seem to notice anything was wrong. She was always smiling, always happy to see Aaron. Maybe it was just me overthinking everything, but something felt off, and I couldn't let it go. Part 1, The Revelation. It was a Thursday night when I finally got the confirmation I didn't want. Aaron and I had planned to meet up for drinks after work, but he texted me earlier that day saying he'd be running late. I didn't mind waiting, I was used to his busy schedule. So I went ahead to our usual spot, ordered a drink, and settled in. An hour passed. No sign of Aaron. I sent him a quick text, "You still coming?" Nothing. I sighed and glanced around the bar. It wasn't like Aaron to just ghost me, especially when we had made solid plans. I figured maybe he got caught up at work, or maybe something had come up at home. Either way, I was about to call it a night when I saw him walk through the door. But he wasn't alone. A woman was with him, dark-haired, slender, and definitely not Emily. I watched as they walked in, her hand brushing against his arm in a way that screamed intimacy. They didn't see me at first, they were too absorbed in each other. Aaron led her to a table in the back, away from the main crowd, and they sat down close, heads almost touching as they spoke in hushed tones. My heart pounded in my chest. Was this really happening? My best friend, the guy I had grown up with, the man who stood in front of his family and friends and vowed to be faithful to his wife, was sitting in front of me with someone else. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. For a moment, I considered confronting him, walking over there and demanding an explanation. But I stayed frozen in my seat, unable to move, unable to speak. I watched them for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. They didn't stay long, maybe an hour at most. And when they left together, walking out of the bar as if they were any other couple, completely unaware that I had seen the whole thing. I drove home that night in silence, my mind spinning with questions. Who was this woman? How long had this been going on? And more importantly, why? Why was Aaron, the guy I thought I knew better than anyone, risking everything for this? I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Aaron and that woman. I saw them laughing, touching, leaving together. And I thought about Emily, sweet, trusting Emily, who had no idea what was happening behind her back. Part 2, The Confrontation. The next day, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth. I called Aaron and asked him to come over to my place. I didn't tell him why, just that I needed to talk to him. When he showed up, he looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept either. I wondered if he knew what was coming, if he could sense the tension in my voice when I called. "Aaron, who is Leah?" I asked, the moment he sat down. No preamble, no small talk. I needed answers. He froze, his eyes widening for a fraction of a second before he quickly masked his surprise. "What are you talking about?" "I saw you," I said quietly. "At the bar. With her." For a moment, Aaron didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the edge of the couch. Then he let out a long breath, slumping back in his seat. "It's not what you think," he said, though even he didn't sound convinced. "Really?" "Because it looked exactly like what I think it is," I shot back. I was angry now, all the frustration I had been holding back finally boiling over. "You're cheating on Emily, aren't you?" Aaron didn't deny it. He just rubbed his face with his hands, looking defeated. "It's complicated," he muttered. "Complicated? Aaron, you're married. There's nothing complicated about that." He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." I stared at him, disbelief coursing through me. How could he be so casual about this? How could he act like it was some unavoidable accident? "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice low, barely controlled. "A few months," Aaron admitted. "But it's not like I don't care about Emily. I do. I love her. Things have just been hard lately." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much of an idiot he was for throwing everything away. But another part of me, maybe the part that still saw him as my best friend, just felt sad. Sad for him, for Emily, for everything they were about to lose. "You need to tell her," I finally said, my voice firm. "Emily deserves to know the truth." Aaron shook his head. "I can't. She'll leave me." "She might," I agreed. "But if you don't tell her, it's going to be a lot worse when she finds out on her own." He didn't respond. We sat in silence for a long time, neither of us knowing what to say. I knew he was scared, and I knew he didn't want to lose Emily. But he had already lost her the moment he chose to be with Leah. Part 3, The Bombshell. For weeks, I wrestled with what to do. Aaron didn't seem to have any intention of coming clean, and I wasn't sure if it was my place to tell Emily. I avoided seeing her, partly because I didn't know how to act around her, and partly because I was afraid I'd accidentally let something slip. It was a nightmare, trying to balance my loyalty to Aaron with my guilt over keeping this massive secret from Emily. Then one day, the decision was made for me. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was at Aaron's house for a barbecue he and Emily were hosting. It was supposed to be a fun, casual get-together with a few close friends, but the tension was palpable. I could feel it in the way Aaron avoided eye contact with Emily, the way she tried to act cheerful, even though something seemed off. I wasn't the only one who noticed it, either. Our mutual friend, Jake, pulled me aside at one point and asked if everything was okay between them. I didn't know how to respond. Before I could figure it out, Emily came over to us, holding her phone with a look of shock and confusion on her face. "Did you know about this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jake and I exchanged confused glances. "About what?" She held up her phone, showing us a series of texts between Aaron and Leah. Explicit texts. My heart dropped into my stomach. Somehow, someway, Emily had found out. Aaron, who had been talking with another group of friends, noticed the commotion and came over, his face going pale as soon as he saw Emily's expression. "Emily, I can explain," he started, but she cut him off. "Don't," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to hear it." She turned and walked inside, leaving Aaron standing there in the middle of his own barbecue, humiliated and exposed. He didn't follow her. He just stood there, frozen, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. Jake looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What the hell, man? You knew about this?" I didn't answer. What could I say? I felt sick to my stomach, knowing that I had played a part in all of this by staying silent for so long. Part 4, The Aftermath. The next few weeks were a blur of anger, regret, and heartbreak. Emily moved out almost immediately, staying with a friend while she filed for divorce. Aaron was a wreck. He called me constantly, asking for advice, begging for help, but what could I do? There was no fixing this. He had destroyed his marriage, and now he was paying the price. Leah, the woman at the center of it all, disappeared from the picture. Aaron tried to reach out to her, but she wanted nothing to do with him now that everything had blown up. In the end, he lost both of them, his wife and the woman he thought he wanted. I tried to be there for him, but it was hard. Our friendship had always been built on trust, and now that trust was shattered. Every time I looked at him, I saw the lies, the betrayal, and the pain he had caused. I couldn't pretend everything was okay, because it wasn't. Nothing was okay anymore. Eventually, Aaron moved away, trying to start fresh somewhere else. We still talk occasionally, but it's not the same. It never will be. The bond we had was broken, and I don't think it will ever fully heal. As for Emily, she's doing better now. She's moved on, found a new job, and seems to be rebuilding her life piece by piece. We talk every once in a while, but there's still a distance between us, a reminder of everything that happened. And me? I'm left with the memories of it all, the secrets, the lies, the fallout. I've learned that sometimes, no matter how much you care about someone, you can't save them from themselves. And in the end, it's not your job to. Aaron made his choices, and he's the one who has to live with them. It was the kind of secret that eats away at you, the kind that I never thought I'd have to keep, especially not from my own brother. I've always looked up to my older brother, Kyle. He's 5 years older than me, and growing up, he was the person I tried to emulate in every way. He was popular, charming, and the kind of guy who could talk his way out of anything. Everyone loved him, and I was no exception. As we got older, our relationship stayed close, despite the age gap. He got married young, at 25, to a woman named Jessica, who fit perfectly into our family. She was kind, easygoing, and she loved Kyle with everything she had. I figured they were set for life. But people aren't always what they seem. And marriages aren't always as strong as they appear from the outside. About 2 years ago, Kyle started acting strange. It was subtle at first, just small things. He stopped coming over to family dinners as often, claimed he was working late more frequently, and whenever Jessica's name came up in conversation, he'd change the subject. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured he was just busy with work or going through a rough patch. Every relationship has its ups and downs, right? It wasn't until one random Saturday afternoon that everything began to make sense. Kyle and I were supposed to meet up for lunch at a local sports bar we both loved. I got there early, grabbed a booth, and ordered us some beers. While I was waiting, I scrolled through my phone, not paying much attention to the people around me, until I saw Kyle walk in. But he wasn't alone. He had his arm around a woman I didn't recognize, someone who definitely wasn't Jessica. She was younger, probably in her mid-20s, with long blonde hair and a bright smile. They were laughing, looking completely comfortable together, like this wasn't their first time out in public. I felt my stomach twist into a knot as I watched them make their way to a booth in the corner, completely unaware that I was there. For a second, I thought I must be seeing things. This couldn't be my brother. Kyle would never do something like this. He loved Jessica. They'd been together for nearly a decade, and while I knew they'd had their arguments, I never imagined he'd be the kind of guy to cheat. But as I watched them from across the bar, it became painfully clear that this wasn't just a casual outing between friends. The way he touched her, the way she leaned into him, it was unmistakable. I didn't confront him that day. I couldn't. I felt sick, confused, and unsure of what to do. Instead, I finished my drink as quickly as I could and left before they could see me. I drove home in silence, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Did Jessica know? What was I supposed to do with this information? I didn't want to believe it, but there was no denying what I had seen. My brother was having an affair. Part 1, The Discovery. For the next few days, I wrestled with what to do. Every time I thought about telling Jessica, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to be lied to be betrayed by the man she loved. But at the same time, I couldn't bring myself to confront Kyle. He was my brother. We'd been through everything together, high school, family drama, the ups and downs of life. How could I be the one to ruin everything? And what if I was wrong? What if this was just some misunderstanding? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The way Kyle had looked at that woman, the way they'd acted together, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an affair, plain and simple. And the longer I kept quiet, the worse I felt. I started avoiding Kyle. Every time he called or texted, I made up some excuse not to hang out. I couldn't look him in the eye without feeling like I was betraying Jessica. I was stuck in this awful limbo, torn between my loyalty to my brother and the guilt of knowing what he was doing behind his wife's back. Then, one night, everything came crashing down. I was at home, scrolling through social media, when I saw a post from Jessica. It was a picture of her and Kyle, smiling at some event they'd attended earlier that day. The caption read, 9 years of marriage and still going strong. The guilt hit me like a freight train. 9 years of marriage. 9 years of building a life together, of making promises, of believing in each other. And here Kyle was, throwing it all away for someone else. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to talk to him. Part 2, The Confrontation. The next day, I called Kyle and asked him to meet me at a coffee shop near my place. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I think he could tell something was off. When he arrived, he looked tired, worn down, like the weight of his double life was starting to take its toll. We sat down, and for a few minutes, we just made small talk, catching up, talking about work, sports, the usual. But I couldn't keep it up for long. My mind was buzzing with the confrontation I knew was coming. "Kyle, I need to ask you something," I said, my voice low. He looked up at me, his expression cautious. "What's going on with you and Jessica?" He hesitated, his fingers drumming on the table. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you cheating on her?" His face went pale, and for a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he let out a long sigh, slumping back in his chair. "It's not what you think." My heart sank. Those were the exact words I didn't want to hear. "Kyle, I saw you. At the bar. With another woman." He didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, looking like the weight of the world was crushing down on him. "It's complicated." "It always is," I muttered, the anger bubbling up inside me. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to Jessica? She thinks you're this perfect husband, and you're out here screwing around with someone else." Kyle rubbed his face, his shoulders slumping. "I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did." "How long?" I demanded, my voice rising. "How long have you been cheating on her?" "About 6 months," he admitted quietly, his eyes downcast. "But it's not like I don't love Jessica. I do. It's just, things between us have been rough lately. We've been fighting a lot. She's been distant, and I don't know. I didn't want it to get this far." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my brother, the guy I'd looked up to my whole life. How could he be so careless? So selfish? "You need to tell her," I said, my voice firm. "You need to come clean." Kyle shook his head, his expression desperate. "I can't. If I tell her, she'll leave me. I'll lose everything." I leaned forward, my voice low and intense. "Kyle, you already have. She just doesn't know it yet." Part 3, The Fallout. For weeks, Kyle avoided the inevitable. He didn't tell Jessica. Instead, he carried on as if nothing had changed. But something had. Every time I saw them together, I felt like I was watching a ticking time bomb. Jessica had no idea, and I was caught in the middle, watching as my brother's lies slowly unraveled. Then one night, it all came crashing down. I was at my apartment, watching TV, when I got a frantic call from Jessica. Her voice was shaking, barely holding it together. "Is Kyle with you?" I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "No, why? What's going on?" She let out a ragged breath. "I found out, Will. I know about the other woman." My stomach dropped. "What? How?" She was crying now, the sound breaking my heart. I saw the texts on his phone. He was stupid enough to leave it unlocked. I saw everything. How could he do this to me? I didn't know what to say. What could I say? I had known for weeks, and I hadn't told her. I had betrayed her, too. "Jessica, I'm so sorry." Her sobs grew louder. "I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can ever forgive him." And just like that, the bomb had gone off. Everything was out in the open, and there was no going back. Part 4, The End. In the weeks that followed, everything fell apart. Jessica kicked Kyle out of their house, and the divorce papers followed soon after. Kyle was a mess, drowning in regret and guilt. He came to me more than once, asking for advice, asking for help. But what could I do? He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. As for Jessica, she moved on. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but she did. She found a new job, moved to a new city, and slowly rebuilt her life. We stayed in touch, but things were never the same. I had lost not just a brother but a friend in her. Kyle? He's still trying to pick up the pieces of his life, but I don't think he'll ever truly recover from the choices he made. Our relationship has never fully healed, and I'm not sure it ever will. And me? I've learned that secrets like this can eat away at you, destroy relationships, and leave scars that never fade. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't witnessing someone else's downfall, it's living with the knowledge that you couldn't stop it.